glad you've shown up today because as you can see on the screen, there's a green dot. Yep, you bet. I don't know where it is. Maybe over there, maybe over there. It depends on who edits this and where they want me to be. But anyway, so there's a green dot somewhere on there. And what is a green dot? Well, it's you. Yep. That's what I bring you here today for, to learn a little bit about you and to learn a little bit about how we study you. There's a reason that we're talking about you quite a bit here because this is single subject research. And one of the things that gets confusing about single subject research is how do we study one person but learn about others at the same time? And we do that through the process of generalization, of course, and all those fun things. But let's look at this core logic of what we're talking about here. And essentially, this is going to be a discussion of how external validity works in our field. In behavior analysis and in single subject research or small n design or whatever it is you wanted to say. Essentially, it's repeated measures of one individual at a time. You can do single subject research on lots of people at once. It's just very time consuming, challenging to track all those people all the time. But anyway, we'll go there. We'll get back to that in a second. So let's first talk about how research is often done in other parts of, in other sciences. So let's look at psychology, sociology, some of these other types of social sciences have a different approach to external validity. So let's take a little bit of a look at that at first. So remember, I said that you are the green dot, right? So yes, of course you're the green dot. So, but there's more dots, right? Those are all different peoples. Those are all different yous. They're not really you, obviously, but there's a purple person, an orange person, I don't know, was that a beige? I don't know, weird color. There's a teal person. There's all the people all the time are out there, right? So these are them, right? You're studying them. And in group research, we take all of these people and we do this. We squish them together and we bring them to this one little thing and boom, what do we get? We get the mean, right? The mean is that little gray dot in the middle, right? That wasn't a person. We can back up. We can see that look, that person wasn't there. Right? Suddenly they are. They've manifested this thing called the mean has manifested. That mean does not represent an individual. It represents an aggregate number that has been pulled out of all of these individuals and treated as one. They're treated as a population. Right? So the mean represents the population, not an individual. That becomes a huge important point for our science because we don't like to take people and muddy them up. We like to study them for their individuality, who they are, those individual colors, right? So we want to study each one of those people. And I don't just mean skin color. You get the idea. Just dots on a screen, people. Don't get too stressed about it. Anyway, so we're going to bring all those fancy things together into one magical dot, which doesn't really represent a single individual. However, in population level experimentation, population level science, we're not really worried about a single individual. We're worried about distributions across large groups of people and saying, what's the probability that you're going to do something or be some way or act in some way or vote in some way or something like that. So we're looking for broader trends. But in behavior analytics science, we are looking for very, very specific details. So what we're not interested in is that gray dot. We're interested then in all of the individuals. So we're going to study each individual at once. We're not going to worry about this aggregate measure called the mean. We're going to focus on just the raw data of an individual. And then after that, we're going to do this fun stuff called replication. Okay, so we're going to shift gears here in just a second and switch into the two types of replication. But before I do that, I want to kind of plant the seed about what external validity looks like in our field. So on the screen, you can see all these different representations of individuals, right? So what happens if an intervention works for the lilac person? How about the teal person and the tealish greenish person? I don't know, seafoam, there we go. The seafoam person. And how about that weird taupey color that just makes me cringe? I don't even know what that color is. It's like borderline chartreuse without the power of like glowiness, and it's gross. But anyway, beside the point, what I'm getting at is that if it works for each one of these little individuals here, each people, it's probably going to work for somebody else, right? We're going to look at that and what that looks like in terms of replication in just a moment. But it is that individuality that we are interested in. We're not worried about a group mean of an average. Did it work on average? I don't even know what that means on average for a group of people. But what we are interested in is, did it work for each one of these folks under their constraints, under their environment? Did this intervention, or whatever it is, was it effective? Okay, and that is that single subject approach. So we're going to focus on one person. How does that go beyond one person? How do we deal with it? Well, like I said, we're going to generalize it using replication type procedures, but that's really what we're going to do. We're just going to generalize it. And who do we generalize it to? Others, which is external validity. So in this case, our external validity comes from being able to predict the behavior of one person and then showing that that works with other people, or other people not very much like them. Then you get this very tight predictability about the action of an individual rather than this aggregate measure of a group of people. So the two types of external validity are drastically different. Okay, they're both valuable, but you'll hear people all the time say, well, single subject research is bad because your N is small. And it just breaks my brain when people say that, because it means they don't understand what the differences are between the two core sciences. So the core scientific approaches, I should say. We're not worried about population level change. Now, I'm going to put a caveat to that and come back, because there is, and I'll come back right now because it's just the way I am, but maybe not. Anyway, so now I've lost my train of thought. So we're doing population level work when we're looking at averages, and we're looking at individual level work when we're looking at behavior analytic or single subject approach. So we're going to predict the behavior of an individual versus predicting the behavior of, on average, this is going to work or not going to work, and losing some of that granular nature if we go to those larger averages. Now, I said I was going to a little caveat here, and here's where it is. We as a science have done really good at building out the effectiveness of these tools that we have and doing all these replications that we're going to talk about in a second. But what we haven't really ventured out into is this population level impact. And I think that's going to be something that we do start to see more of in our field, because it's been called for repeatedly. And I think people are going to start answering that call, where you have to now start to show that these behavior analytic interventions are significant on a larger, grander statistical scale. Now, there's reasons why I don't personally like that and think that's super valuable, but that's the standard that we have to abide by within the science constraints that we have today. So anyway, there we go. Let's go ahead and switch gears then and get back into what we're talking about with regard to replication. How does this work? How is it that you can take a single individual and make that externally valid, studying one individual? Well, we use this cool procedure called replication, right? So in science, we're always going to replicate our findings, and there's tools that are built into our methodology where we actually replicate our findings within our studies. That's the AB type stuff. So you're replicating treatment effects. So we do all these direct replications already, but we also look at replicating stuff with others. So let's go ahead and take a look at what our graphic shows here. There we go. So let's go ahead and take a look at what this graphic shows, and we've got, look at that, more people. All right, so more people are up on the screen, or over there, we're here, don't care. And you've got 4 individuals, right? Like I said, we made this intervention work with these 4 people. This was our study. We were looking at, let's pick on ourselves. We were doing a test prep study. We're looking to see, is our test prep going to work with these groups of people? So let's do a little bit of a study. Here we go. So we take those 4 people. Now, in this particular, it's a really bad example because you couldn't do test prep with these 4 people. You would have to do something else. But we're going to directly replicate. Let's do it again. Same procedures. In this case, what our idea is to run it again. Right? Now, if it's a permanent behavior change, obviously you can't run it again, so the test prep is a really bad example. But you could run it again with very similar type people. So you could take, hey, I'm the guy in blue, so I'm the blue one, right? So you could run it with another white, bald guy that has a advanced degree in some related field and is middle level finance wise and lives in an apartment in Washington State. Cool, there you go. So you could do that, right? So you could make this particular, what do you call it, replication like that, and it's somebody very similar to me. And then does it work with that person? Yay, it might, right? And we do that again with multiple people, but it's the exact same stuff. Now that's borderline a systematic replication, and you'll understand why when I talk about systematic replication. But if you can do it with the same people, of course you would, but you don't always have that option. But you're not changing anything very drastic about it. You're trying to get an identical copy, if you will. So that direct replication shows you that the treatment is having an impact. Well, what happens when we do it with other people? So we've got a few other people here. So let's take a look. What does that look like? That's called a systematic replication. So we're going to change it completely. So we're going to take And instead of working with somebody that looks like me, we're going to work with somebody that has a drastically different background, maybe a different age, maybe a different gender, maybe a different ethnicity. We're going to try it with them. Does it work with them? And now we know that the person in the blue dot person, it works with them. And we tested it with another style of blue dot person and it worked with them. And now we're testing it with a red dot person. And oh my gosh, that red dot person, look, it worked for them. That's a systematic replication. Now, there's other types of systematic replications where you're looking for the extension or the extent of a, say, an intervention or something like that, and you're looking for, does it, if I tweak the intervention a little bit, does it change? That is not what we're talking about with regard to external validity, but that is another type of systematic replication that you can do when you're looking for the limits, say, of whatever intervention it is that you're working with. And I like to think of direct instruction or something like that. Can you use direct instruction to teach reading and reading? Yes, you can. Systematically replicate that from reading to teaching math. Cool, that's a systematic replication. And then you could also go the other way, let's take math and then go to science. Can you use it to do that? And the answer is yes on all those things. So that's a type of systematic replication, but that's not really getting at what I'm talking about with regard to individuals and trying to establish this concept of external validity from a single subject approach. So by doing this, by focusing on individuals one at a time, now I know that I've got blue dots, that seafoam dot, a lilac dot, and a pinkish dot. I don't know what the colors are anymore. Fuchsia, there we go. And oh, cool, we double checked it with them. It worked a couple of times, nice. And then now we've also generalized that out into orange dots, that weird, awful color, and then another blue dot and a red dot. So it is now externally valid for all of those people, rather than an aggregate that doesn't exist, the gray dot, which is now gone. There is no gray dot, right? That person, these are real people, and it generalizes to them. So we've established external validity through the direct replication process and the systematic replication process. So that's really how we deal with external validity. And you could go to the extreme level and somebody like me and say, well, I don't even think that, like, we're not even talking about the same language. So when I think of external validity in this context, I'm not thinking about the same type of external validity in a large group design type study. They're just completely different types of external validity. So you don't want to get caught in that trap of sample size and all that stuff and having that relevant for a single subject, because it's not. It's just a different approach. And that said, there's another caveat. Sample size by itself doesn't jack up your external validity. It has to do with representative samples. So, and that is beyond the scope of this channel, like ish. Maybe someday we'll go into the stat stuff. I don't know, maybe not. But anyway, there you go, folks. That is external validity in single subject research.